All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a topic today that honestly catches even the best technicians off guard. We're talking about the C175 engine platform, and specifically how it uses two separate cooling circuits to do one massive job. You've got two completely independent cooling loops running at the exact same time, doing two totally different things. One is strictly there to keep the metal from overheating, and the other is just there to keep the air dense. Mix up which sensor belongs to which loop during your troubleshooting, and man, you are going to find yourself chasing the wrong fault for hours. So let's make sure that never happens to you. Here's our quick roadmap for today. First, the tale of the two circuits. Then, how jacket water babysits the metal, followed by how SCAC babysits the air. After that, we'll navigate the sensor identification trap, and finally, we'll arm you with some independent troubleshooting rules. Okay, Section 1. The tale of two circuits. To start things off, we literally have to physically separate these two systems in our minds. If you try to treat them as just one big cooling loop, I guarantee it's going to result in wasted diagnostic time. Looking at this breakdown, it's basically our cheat sheet. The jacket water system, or JW, uses a dual-pass design specifically to remove heat from the engine core, so the block and the cylinder head. Meanwhile, the separate circuit aftercooler, or SCAC, is an entirely different loop that pulls heat out of the compressed intake air before it hits the cylinders. Why does separating them matter so much? Well, the block needs stable, moderate temperatures, but the charge air needs to be aggressively cooled. Combining those two very different needs into a single circuit would force a compromise that hurts both engine longevity and volumetric efficiency.
Think of it kind of like a chef running two sinks in a commercial kitchen. One sink is full of hot, soapy water for washing pots, right? The other sink is full of ice-cold water for chilling delicate seafood. Both are technically water systems, but using the wrong sink for the wrong job absolutely ruins the dish. The engine block needs that stable, moderate heat to protect its metallurgy, while the charge air needs to be iced down to maximize air density. Same fluid types, completely different jobs, and they should never, ever be confused.
Moving on to Section 2, jacket water, and how it essentially babysits the heavy metal of the engine. Following the flow path, the jacket water coolant passes through specific restriction orifices, and this is completely by design to maintain equal supply pressure to every single cylinder head. By routing coolant through the block and head structure twice in that dual-pass design, the system is actively babysitting the structural integrity of the combustion chamber. It's aggressively pulling away that intense heat from the top third of the mid-supported liner. So how exactly does it regulate that heat? The C175 utilizes a really precise electronic thermostat, which is managed by a dedicated temperature control module, or TCM. This module sends a current to a stepper motor that physically moves a piston inside the housing to control the bypass flow. This is absolutely crucial because it minimizes thermal cycling stress. You know, those repeated heating and cooling swings? That's a leading contributor to long-term block fatigue and gasket failure. All right, Section 3, SACAC. Babysitting the air. Let's jump over to the SACAC circuit and see how this builds up our volumetric efficiency. Keep in mind that turbocharging isn't just about forcing in more air. It's really about forcing in denser air. This fully separate SCAC loop is dedicated entirely to cooling the compressed charge air right after the turbocharger stages. By aggressively removing the heat generated by that compression, you maximize the density of the air entering the cylinders. Without this level of cooling, the engine would feel like it's trying to sprint while breathing through a cocktail straw. Visually, you can actually see how the coolant splits between the independent E-stats and the separate pumps. The jacket water uses its own E-stat, while the SCAC utilizes its own completely separate temperature sensors and regulation logic. It really reinforces the mindset you need to have. These are two separate patients with two separate charts. Section 4. The Sensor Identification Trap. Listen up, because this is without a doubt the most critical part of this explainer. The biggest trap you can fall into is letting identical sensor part numbers trick you into misdiagnosing a fault. Because the C175 platform is so streamlined, it actually reuses similar sensor hardware across both of these independent circuits. Never assume a temperature or pressure fault code belongs to the jacket water circuit just because the sensor part number, like say the 2883783 temperature sensor, looks familiar to you on a wiring diagram. For instance, take the engine coolant block outlet pressure sensor and the block inlet pressure sensor. This pairing tells you exactly what pressure the coolant enters with and what it leaves with. But, and here's the kicker, that exact same pairing strategy is mirrored perfectly on the SCAC side for its pump inlet and outlet, using the same sensor part family. You must always cross-check the ECM specific parameter ID and the physical wiring location. The part numbers alone just won't give you the whole story.
Let's run a quick scenario. Imagine you're out on a service call. The ECM is throwing a code for high intake manifold temperature. So, you check the jacket water block outlet temperature and find it's completely normal. What's your next move? Where is the actual fault? Way too often, a tech sees that normal JW temp and wrongly concludes, hey, the cooling system's fine.
But in reality, the fault is highly likely a fouled SCAC core. The SCAC is an entirely separate circuit, and those jacket water sensors simply cannot see SCAC problems. If you try to apply a jacket water fix to an SCAC problem, you are going to waste your whole day and, worse, leave the engine totally vulnerable to low air density and rising exhaust temperatures. Section 5 Independent Troubleshooting Rules. To make sure that mix-up never happens to you, let's lay out some highly reliable rules of thumb for the field. These formulas are basically your diagnostic anchors, and they apply to both loops completely independently. Rule 1. If you're seeing rising temperatures but a very stable inlet pressure, point your investigation toward a heat rejection problem. Think clogged radiator, a failing fan, or a dirty heat exchanger. Rule 2. If you see falling inlet pressure but stable temperatures, that points toward a flow restriction or a dying pump. Treat the JW and SCAC data independently through these rules, and you'll hit the root cause every single time. So, we've mastered isolating the circuits, we've properly cooled the metal block, and we've successfully iced down the intake air. But ask yourself, how does the engine handle the massive residual heat that is still rushing downstream toward the exhaust system and those highly sensitive electronic modules? Keep that provocative question in mind as you review your service manuals, because managing that downstream heat is exactly where the C17's precision truly gets put to the test.